Hello. Today we are joined by Gleb Nosovsky. We'll be discussing some biographical facts about two of the most famous rulers of Russia, Ivan the Terrible and Peter the Great. In the Multimedia Museum The New Chronology, the era of Ivan the Terrible is represented in the hall titled Reformation, Collapse of the Empire. Here, visitors can learn who really ruled under the name Ivan the Terrible, what the Oprichnina actually was, what the European Reformation entailed, and how it influenced the fate of Russia and the entire world. Gleb Vladimirovich, welcome. Thank you for agreeing to meet again and share more about your research.
Hello, Svetlana. It's always a pleasure to meet with you.
Gleb Vladimirovich, you and Anatoly Fomenko wrote a book titled The Imaginary Tsar and the False Tsar, in which you closely examine the reigns of Ivan IV the Terrible and Peter I. But while the time of Ivan the Terrible is the 16th century, Peter I's reign belongs to the late 17th and early 18th centuries, a period you hadn't previously studied in depth. Why did you decide to research the biography of Peter I?
Actually, we were focused on researching the era of Ivan the Terrible. But this research unexpectedly led us to Peter. Although we had heard and were aware of the rumors circulating in Peter's time, that he was an impostor, that a different man, a German, was brought back from the Grand Embassy, we knew there were some oddities. We were familiar with those rumors. However, we never base our research on rumors and have always treated them with caution. Our approach is this. First, we must obtain some kind of formal mathematical result. Only after that do we consider rumors or various other information that aligns with what the formal calculations indicate. So, for us, the starting point is always a formal computation. After that, we may incorporate linguistics, hearsay, and so on. We never start from rumors or linguistics or anything else that's uncertain. And that was the case here as well. Although we knew that contemporaries claimed Peter was an impostor, we generally disregarded those claims. In 2013, we once again visited Alexandrovskaya Sloboda. We had been there several times before and decided to visit the museum again. It's a very interesting place. One of the churches in Alexandrovskaya Sloboda now houses a museum. In the Pokrovsky Church, there was an exhibition called The Tsar's Court in Alexandrovskaya Sloboda. This was in 2013. While walking through the halls of the museum and looking around, we came across an exact replica of Ivan the Terrible's ivory throne, which is housed in the Kremlin Armory. In the armory, it's behind glass, and you can't get close to it. It's a valuable ancient artifact under armored glass. There are many different engravings on it, but it's very difficult, almost impossible, to make them out. In publications, it's only shown from one side, and even there, one can see a lot of small images. It's clear that something is depicted, but nothing particularly interesting stands out at first glance. We had flipped through the page with the throne image many times in the album, but nothing had ever really caught our eye. But now, standing next to this replica, which you could approach and even touch, it's a plastic replica, although an accurate one, our attention was immediately drawn to the engravings on it. Now I'll show some photos. On the front panel at the bottom, there's a row of 3 images. It turns out these are zodiac symbols, which immediately caught our eye, as we already had considerable experience decoding and dating European zodiacs. On an intuitive level, we sensed something interesting could be hidden here. Perhaps we didn't immediately understand that it was a zodiac, but it was eye-catching. We took thorough photos from all sides, this side, that side. These are 3 engraved scenes at the bottom depicting planets. I won't go into detail about the decoding now. It's a very simple zodiac. If you have experience working with medieval European zodiacs, this one is quite straightforward. Here, the moon is shown rapidly moving through Capricorn. Here is the sun, a man with a woman's chest. That's ancient Egyptian symbolism for Aquarius. So, the sun is in Aquarius. And here are the remaining 5 planets. Saturn is depicted as Cronus, according to mythology, devouring his children. Jupiter is lying on a pig with a curly tail, because according to one myth, Jupiter was nursed by a pig. Here are 2 more planets. Venus, shown here as Rhea, is reaching out with her hands. Here are Pisces. One has a tail, with a head at the end, and here's the mouth of the fish. Another fish is shown as well. Altogether, it's a fairly simple zodiac that can be dated. By the way, this is a photo of the original from an album. This is the actual throne in the Kremlin armory. It shows the same images. Later, we carefully checked the original and confirmed that it shows exactly the same thing as the replica. We verified all of it thoroughly. This is a photo of the original. The date that came out from the zodiac is February 9, 1526. However, if you open the textbooks, they state that Ivan the Terrible was born, if I recall correctly, on August 15, 1530, or something like that. I don't remember the exact date right now. The throne was a gift to him. It was brought from Western Europe. A natural thought arises. If this throne, made in Western Europe, was gifted to him, then most likely the horoscope engraved on it depicts the birth date of Ivan IV. That's a very natural assumption. That was common practice in the 16th century. So, we began to wonder, what if February 9, 1526, is actually the birthday of Ivan IV, the first of those represented today under the name Ivan the Terrible? Let me remind you that according to the new chronology, the name Ivan the Terrible refers to 4 different Tsars. Right now, we're talking about the very first of them, Ivan Vasilievich. So, 1526 instead of 1530, and specifically February 9th. February 9th is the feast day of Saint Parthenius. And we know that Ivan the Terrible wrote works under the pen name Parthenius. A lot of things fall into line. In particular, the birth date currently attributed to him in 1530 corresponds with the name Ivan. So, people say, see, the name was Ivan, and he was named Ivan. However, by that time we already knew that on the Moscow throne there were people ruling under the name Ivan Vasilievich, Vasily III, then Ivan Vasilievich, then Vasily Ivanovich, then Ivan Vasilievich again. So, there was an alternation between the names Ivan Vasilievich and Vasily Ivanovich. But they gave their children different names. We already knew that their baptismal names were not actually Ivan and Vasily. A Tsar couldn't have known in advance which of his children would survive and become his heir. They named their children differently. How could they have guessed correctly who to name Ivan or Vasily so that he would become Tsar? That would have been impossible. Children often died young. It's well known that the baptismal names of the Moscow Tsars weren't Ivan and Vasily. Ivan III was baptized as Timofey, and Vasily III as Gavriel. So, it's documented that their given names were different. So why did Ivan IV suddenly have the baptismal name Ivan? That was also suspicious. How could they have known that this child would survive and become Tsar? Other children might be born later. He might die in infancy or early childhood. That struck us as odd. And when it turned out that he may have been born in 1526, and that his name was Parthenius, the same name he signed his writings with, then everything fell into place. Moreover, it's known that Ivan IV was married off too early and crowned too early. People have discussed this. It was somehow earlier than it should have been. But if he was actually 4 years older, all those oddities disappear. That means he was crowned and married right on time. If he was 4 years older, then everything lines up. The picture with Ivan IV has become much clearer. By the way, I'd like to draw your attention to the fact that all the chronicles give the same incorrect year, 1530. This indicates that these chronicles came from a single workshop and that the error was not accidental. If the errors were independent, then one chronicle might have one date, another a different one, and a third might have the correct year. But no, all of them show the same mistaken date. That means all our chronicles that describe the 16th century weren't distorted randomly, but were deliberately altered under centralized direction. This is one of the striking signs that prove this was the case. We've known this for a long time, but here it becomes immediately obvious. Here, by the way, is our reconstruction of Ivan the Terrible's reign. 4 Tsars. Right now, we're speaking about Ivan IV. He was crowned in 1547. If he had been born in 1530, he would have been only 17. But in reality, he was born in 1526. He was 21. At 21, it was already customary to be crowned. And so on. Here are the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. That's already a different dynasty, Simeon Ivan. His name was Simeon. When he was crowned, he took the royal name Ivan, but he named his children differently. His son was Fyodor Ivanovich, then came Boris Fyodorovich and Fyodor Borisovich. So, this was the dynasty of Ivans and Vasilis. And starting with Simeon, who ruled under his old name, a new dynasty began, the Boris and Fyodor's line. This is essentially the Godunov dynasty. That's about Ivan the Terrible. Also a very interesting topic, one that even has relevance today. Now let's return to Peter. Looking at this whole situation, we decided to make a table, to see how the other Tsars' birthdays correspond to their baptismal names. Here's the table. Ivan III. Naturally, all dates are in the Julian calendar. We look at when he was born and what his baptismal name was. His name was Timofey. When is Saint Timofey's feast day? The name day in his honor. The name day should be close to the birthday. Here we show the difference. In this case, the name day for Saint Timofey, after whom the future Ivan III was named, is January 22nd, exactly the day he was born. So, the difference is 0. For Vasily III, we simply couldn't find the birth date, so we've marked it with question marks. We know his baptismal name was Gavriel. The birth date is unknown. For Ivan IV, we also initially marked question marks because we solved that question using the zodiac. So, in this table there are question marks, because we began with not knowing. Later, of course, we filled in that row too. Next is Fyodor Ivanovich. His birth date is known. His name is known. The difference is plus 5 days, which is generally acceptable. And so on. For Alexei Mikhailovich Romanov, it's minus 2 days. Here, minus 4 or plus 3 days. These are the Romanovs. Fyodor Alexeyevich, Ivan Alexeyevich, plus 2 days. Here is Alexei Petrovich, 6. Here 3. And in this table, there's one glaring outlier. 12 or 13 days. That's for Peter I. He was born on May 30th, but the nearest saint's day for someone named Peter is May 18th. There are many saints named Peter, so plenty of feast days with that name. In fact, the name Peter appears so often in the church calendar that if you were to randomly pick any day of the year, the average distance to the nearest St. Peter's feast day would be less than these 12 days. What we actually get here is a maximum, a completely random result. So, the distance between Peter Alexeyevich's birth date and the nearest saint's day for someone named Peter is random. If you choose a day at random from the calendar, the distance to a St. Peter's feast day would usually be shorter. So, from this, it follows that the name Peter has no connection to Peter's birthday. Which is surprising, because in all the other cases there's a clear link. In this case, of course, the rumors that he was switched, that he was not who he claimed to be, that during the Grand Embassy one Tsar left and a different man returned, suddenly took on a very different weight for us, because we now saw a sort of formal calculation suggesting that something was off with Peter. From there, we started digging into what is known. The name associated with Peter's actual birthday is Isaac. The name Isaac is familiar to us. St. Isaac's Cathedral stands in St. Petersburg. It wasn't built in honor of Peter, but in honor of Isaac. Isaac is the saint for whom the cathedral was named, and whose feast day coincided with the birth of the Peter the Great we know. He built a cathedral in St. Petersburg in honor of his saint, Isaac, not Peter. Then you can look at portraits of the early Romanovs. Their faces are quite distinctive, narrow, long-nosed. These are the Tsareviches Peter and Ivan Alexeyevich. Elongated faces, long noses, a certain shape to the lips. Here's their sister Sophia, same kind of face. The same with Alexey Mikhailovich and all their relatives. Here, by the way, is a rather rare portrait of young Peter Alexeyevich. This is the real Peter Alexeyevich. Look at his face. This is an authentic portrait. Pay close attention. Look at the nose, the lips, the overall outline of his young face. This was before the Grand Embassy. And here's a portrait of Peter the Great. Here is his death mask. It's a completely different face. Different skull shape, his is rounded, not elongated. The nose is different. The lips are different, everything is different. And this, by the way, is Alexey Petrovich, Tsarevich Alexey. It is believed that Peter executed his own son, Tsarevich Alexey. Look, Tsarevich Alexey looks just like the other Romanovs. He has the Romanov face, not Peter's. So, in reality, Tsarevich Alexey was not killed by his own father. He was killed by the impostor Peter. Look at what happened. When Peter was returning from the Grand Embassy, before entering Moscow, he stopped and waited for a certain battle to take place. In that battle, a certain army commander Shayan defeated the entire Moscow Streltsy army. It was a battle near Moscow, by the Voskresensky monastery. And only after victory in that battle did Peter enter Moscow. So, he entered Moscow as a result of a military victory, achieved by unknown troops. What do historians say? They say that young Peter was friends with peasant boys from two villages, Semyonovsky and Preobrazhensky. From these childhood friends, he supposedly formed two regiments, the Semyonovsky and Preobrazhensky. And with these peasant boys from just two villages, whom he had trained in the art of war, he managed to defeat, near the Voskresensky monastery, the entire infantry, the whole army of the Moscow state. Because the Streltsy were the backbone of the military of Muscovy. It was a powerful force. Just a few decades earlier, they had crushed Stepan Razин's rebellion. They were professional soldiers, recruited not from two villages, but from all over Russia. Any profession requires certain abilities. You can't just pick professional soldiers or great scholars from two villages. We know very well that the larger the population pool, the more likely you are to find professionals in any field. Because talent is born with a certain probability. Scientists are born with a certain probability, and a good soldier, who can be trained into a great warrior, is also born with a certain likelihood. It's impossible for one village to produce only great warriors or scholars or people highly capable in some field. This is always a matter of selection. So, the story that a bunch of village kids grew up and defeated the army of an entire enormous state, it belongs to the realm of fairy tales. And so, Peter, after waiting until certain troops, not from just the two villages of Preobrazhensky and Semyonovsky, but some unknown, much stronger force, defeated the entire Streltsy army, then entered Moscow. That means Moscow was left defenseless, its forces were destroyed. These other troops entered the city, and only after that did Peter come in. He didn't even go to see his relatives, didn't visit his mother. He immediately sent them off to monasteries and started ruling. All of this is, of course, quite strange. Right after that, he paid a massive sum of money to the Polish king. I don't remember the exact amount, but it was enormous. The question is, why? For what service was this money paid? Naturally, one starts to think that the troops who defeated the Streltsy weren't some village boys, but were Polish troops, maybe others too. The Polish king assembled them, gave the order, and Peter settled accounts with him. And so on. In fact, in the pre-revolutionary Brockhaus and Ephron Encyclopedic Dictionary, there is a very long article about Peter. It was written by Milikov, Pavel Milikov, the same one who was head of the provisional government and was later assassinated abroad. Actually, Milikov was a very smart man. By the way, he was a monarchist. He believed that the system of governance in Russia shouldn't be changed. He was a consistent monarchist and, of course, he was absolutely right. For example, he tried to persuade Mikhail Romanov, who was handed power by Nicholas after his abdication, to accept that power. When Nicholas II abdicated in 1917, he passed authority to Mikhail, but Mikhail simply rejected it, saying that the Constituent Assembly should decide. Several people, including Milikov, came to Mikhail. Milikov tried to convince him that he must not do this, that the monarchical autocracy in Russia should not be dismantled, that it would lead to catastrophe. Mikhail didn't listen, and in fact, Milikov was absolutely right. Though he was a staunch supporter of autocracy, Milikov was also an enemy of the House of Romanov. He constantly spoke out against them. He couldn't stand them. The Romanov family considered him their enemy. He combined a belief in the necessity of autocratic rule for Russia with hatred, disdain, and contempt for the Romanov family. It seems like a strange combination. But if you read the article about Peter I in the Brockhaus and Ephron Encyclopedic Dictionary, it becomes quite clear that the person who wrote it understood that Peter was an impostor. He just didn't state it in black and white, because, of course, it couldn't be said openly before the revolution. But he expresses his point of view about Peter being an impostor so vividly and so strikingly that it's absolutely obvious that he understood it. I recommend reading that article in the Brockhaus and Ephron Encyclopedic Dictionary. It's long, very good, vivid, and it strongly suggests that Peter was an impostor, even though Milikov, of course, doesn't write it outright. The real Peter already had a son. He was born before the Grand Embassy. This son fled and was hiding in Naples. A whole operation was carried out to capture him and bring him back to Russia to be executed. This was done by Tolstoy, who was given the noble title of Count for it. He went to Naples, where Tsarevich Alexei Petrovich was living, and tricked him, convincing him that troops were ready and waiting for him, so he could lead them. These troops were supposedly going to overthrow the impostor and restore him to power. Tolstoy presented it so convincingly that Alexei Petrovich fell for the trap and returned with him to Russia. He was immediately arrested and executed. By the way, Peter I left Moscow and built St. Petersburg. Most likely, he did this knowing that in Moscow he could easily be trapped. Why was St. Petersburg built on the Baltic Sea? So that at any moment he could get on a ship and flee. But Alexei Petrovich had a son, Peter Alexeyevich. This boy, Peter Alexeyevich, was raised by Menshikov, if you recall the history. After the death of the impostor Peter, the boy remained, Peter II Alexeyevich. So, Peter I executed the son of the real Peter, but left the grandson alive. Apparently, there was an idea to raise him in the proper spirit and make use of him. The grandson of the real Peter, Peter II, was not executed and was under the care of Menshikov. After the impostor Peter's death, power passed to his wife Catherine and to Menshikov, who was also close to her. After Catherine I, Peter's wife, died, a time of unrest followed, there was a coup, and supposedly Menshikov was removed from power and exiled to Berezov. But the boy, Peter II, remained. He suddenly caught a cold and died very quickly. Supposedly a natural death, and Menshikov was exiled to Berezov. Digging into this story, and now understanding that Peter was an impostor, we realized that Menshikov couldn't have been exiled to Berezov, because Berezov, this we already knew, was in another country at the time. All of Siberia only came under Romanov control after the war with Pugachev. During Peter's time, exiling Menshikov to a foreign country would have been impossible. So, if Menshikov ended up in Berezov, it means he fled there, it wasn't an exile.
Gleb Vladimirovich, thank you for this conversation.
Thank you.
In our next video podcast, we'll continue the conversation with Gleb Nosovsky about the Romanov dynasty's rule, and what school textbooks don't tell you. Subscribe to our channel and visit the Multimedia Museum of the New Chronology. See you soon.
Feasts and drinking bouts are followed by executions, in which the Tsar himself sometimes plays the role of executioner. From the end of September to the end of October 1698, more than 1,000 Streltsy were executed. In February 1699, hundreds more Streltsy were again put to death. The Moscow Streltsy army ceased to exist. After the disbandment of the Streltsy, this state had no infantry at all. Russia enters the ranks of European powers, but for the first time only to become, for nearly half a century, a tool in the hands of European politics. Pavel Milukov.